Hey everyone, you have tuned into the international version of Litvak Leadership Live today, because our guest today is, and I think I'm going to hack her last name, but I'm going to say it's Chiara Covone. Close?
Well,
Close enough. Okay, Chiara Covone, and she is in suburban Stockholm, Sweden, and she is a coach that found herself coaching herself, and that's how she got into coaching. So, Chiara, how are you? And welcome to the show.
Thank you, Sean, for having me. Yes, I'm very well, and yeah, very excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
As I was looking at your website, and here, let me throw the website address up there for everyone. I found it really interesting how you had talked about how you were excelling at work, but you were in the corporate world, and you'd come home exhausted. Your husband's exhausted. You're disengaged. It's that chaotic, typical people talk about two-income family with kids, and you knew there had to be a better way. So you got an executive or you got a coach to help you reading your website, and then you found out that yes, it helped, but you could help yourself more. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I think it's interesting that Sarah hit a bit the wall in your life to really realize where the opportunities lies. And so I grew in Italy. I'm actually Italian originally, and the life was smooth. Life was you check the boxes and you go on and you build your career. You start getting promotions after promotions. Start establishing yourself in the corporate world. And then you arrive in that point in life, particularly in Italy. I think we do get married a bit later than in all other countries. And then you're like, okay, I'm gonna settle down. I'm gonna have a family and then get married. So we got twins, and that was a shock. Nobody prepared me for that. Everybody talks so beautiful it is to have kids. That's a lie. I love my kids.
It is beautiful to have kids.
God, it was hard to jiggle around between still wanting to be a woman in her career and drive her team and drive her project, and having to figure out how to do that also by being a good mom with responsibilities and figuring out. And we women, we go through a huge hormonal change as well, which is completely underestimated. And I guess because I had twins, I probably had it twice as big and as loud. And so I was really trying hard to do it all.
Right.
But you start really having that sense of scarcity, a sense of I'm never enough. I'm at work and I feel guilty because I'm not back home. I'm home taking care of the house and the kids and everything, and you feel like, oh my God, I should call my team. I should listen when that happened. You want to be more traveling. You want to be more there, organizing team meetings and organizing fantastic events, projects, etc. So it's exhausting, and you're really in this hamster wheel. And so something really happened, and I lost completely my confidence, and I felt like, what is this? What is this life about? I don't understand it. I don't recognize it. This is not fun. and so, as you said, I got myself a coach, an executive coach, and I started really understanding a lot about how our brain works, why we do things the way we do, why we don't do the things that we promise ourselves to do. And really understanding better how we click and what we do. And I think because I didn't have the need in my life was so smooth and easy, as I said, that I didn't have to face that. Maybe other people face it earlier in life. I didn't. And so it was a big drama for me. But I started reading a lot about studying. One of the practice that the coach gave me to start with was journaling. Start writing down your thoughts, start looking at your thoughts. So I really wanted to understand that better. And I'm very curious.
Yeah, you're very
really
frozen at the moment.
I'm head of innovation. Used to be head of innovation, vice president of innovation for large corporations.
Back up one second, because you froze there. You said you're very what? You said I'm very
curious.
Okay.
Curious. I have a strong curiosity.
Okay.
I want to find out about things. Yeah, I wanna
Okay.
learn more about things. When you give me something that is interesting, I start digging and I start understanding. So I started reading a lot of books, started listening to a lot of podcasts, started really digging myself deep into this world of how the brain works. I started reading um, articles from various different coaches and established people, and really found that so fascinating. How this is not we're not taught, at least not in Europe. We're not taught these things. We're not taught about emotional intelligence. We're not taught about being authentic. We're not taught about why we want to fit in, why we do what we do, and why we don't do what we said we would do. And so really went way further than what the coach was actually giving me. And I started learning also around how do you self-coach yourself? What are the models that are there? And I started studying authors like Byron Katie, Eckhart Tolle, Tony Robbins, and other people, a lot of Americans in all of this, although Eckhart is more German than American. And I loved how the thought is provoked by our brain, and how much we want to be escaping reality to protect ourselves, how our brain really tries to protect ourselves, and we have the gremlins that wants to that stimulate our imposter syndrome, and how our feelings are provoked by our thoughts. So that when you say something, we still believe that I'm reacting sad, that my feeling is, and the reality is that what you said is very neutral. It's how I think about what you said that makes me feel a certain way. And so that passage is where
so
all
let's
the
pause
power
a second, because you've said a bunch of really interesting things. So let me ask you, let's dial it back a second to emotional intelligence. So when you look at leaders who have emotional intelligence, one, let's define what emotional intelligence is, in your opinion, because I've heard various definitions. And two, why is it so important?
Yeah. So emotional intelligence is a very complex subject, but I'm going to give you one of my key differentiate that somebody that is emotionally intelligent will make versus somebody that isn't emotionally intelligent, or hasn't practiced and hasn't developed the skill of emotional intelligence, will not make the distinction, which is the distinction between who you are and what you do.
Wait,
because
okay, so it's between
if you're
who
emotional
you are and
intelligence, you're
what
going to
you are?
detach those two things.
You broke
And
up.
what you
Say it
do.
again. And what you do. Got it. Okay.
Who you, yes, yeah. So who you are and what you do are two different things. When you're not emotional intelligence, you're going to be very sensitive to other people's opinion, because you're going to make it mean that whatever people say, it means that you're not good. You're not performing to the standard. You're feeling it personally attacked. Versus when you differentiate, and I do this metaphor to let my clients also understand that very immediately. Who you are is like the sky. The sky is always there. It's unchangeable. It's not
Okay.
unchangeable, but it's not as changeable as weather. So the sky is there. This is who you are. You're born complete. You're born. You don't need to prove anything to anyone. That's who you are. Yeah. And then what you do is determining your results. So a
Okay.
day, it might be cloudy. There is a lot of clouds. A day, it's bright. There's no clouds in the sky. So what you do determines who you are. It determines how you come across, how you show up in the world. It doesn't determine
Now,
who you
I
are.
always thought emotional intelligence was understanding one's own motivations and emotions for the strategies and, most importantly, tactics that an individual works in. Because if you don't understand your personal why you want to achieve something, and why you're acting the way you are, that would be a lack of emotional intelligence. So what you're saying, and you're giving it a completely different definition altogether, that it's the difference between who you are and what you do. Or is there a similarity there that I'm missing?
Yes. It's complementary, because the differentiation between who you are and what you do is the first step. Afterwards, when you understand that, okay, I am this is who I am, and this is what I want to do. So what do I want to do? That's your why. Then, what is it that I want to do? What is it that drives me? What are my passions? What are my values? So then you get to that step further. But the first distinction is about understanding that your worth is not at stake, that you are in a leadership position and you don't need to prove yourself. You want to be contributing. So you're starting from a very different place. You don't start from scarcity. You start from, I'm complete and I want to have fun in this world. I want to contribute. So how am I going to contribute? What drives me? What kicks me? So what is my vision? What are my values? What is my why? Where do I want to go? And how am I going to get there? What am I going to try? What are my strategies to get there?
And that's what I talk to people about all the time.
It will get me implementing my strategy. So those are all, so it's all complementary.
Yeah, I mean, I talk to people all the time about, there's
it's a step
you
further.
think
It's next.
but then you got to dig down to what it really is, because your why can be very, surfacey. And what I like to do is take the 5 whys exercise that people use for root cause analysis and apply that to an individual's why to get to the distillation of what the actual why is. So you also talked about imposter syndrome. Now that seems to be a very, very 2020, 2021 syndrome that has just appeared. So if I understand it correctly, imposter syndrome is when someone has achieved something, but they think, I'm not good enough. I really shouldn't be here. This could disappear all at any time. Is that what imposter syndrome is?
Absolutely. It's really about, we all have this chatterbox, this little voice that you can call it the gremlins, you can call it the chatterbox. It's different. Yes, there's this little voice that wants to keep you small, wants you to put a thought of doubt in you. And the reason this chatterbox does it is because it's a primal reason. It's because we are wired for survival. And we are wired for, for having fun, so pleasure, survival, and reproduction. The typical, the fantastic triad of why we are here as a human species. We want to reproduce ourselves, so we want to save energy as much as possible and use the energy to, go and hunt for food, eat, and reproduce ourselves. So everything that is non-basic need, your chatterbox will try to talk you out of it because it's unnecessary. You don't need to strive for that job. You don't need to strive for that, for that publishing career. Don't do that. That's very scary. And also, we're not taught to understand the difference between something we want to be fearful because it's dangerous and something we are fearful because we are afraid of an emotion. Most of the time in our evolved social Western life, the largest fear is an emotion. We're fear of embarrassment. We're fearful of not being loved. We're fearful of being rejected. And those are all, again, primal reasons. Because in the old days, your chances of surviving, if you were on your own, would be very slim. So you wanted to be part of a group. You wanted to fit in. You wanted to blend in, not stand out. That's bad. Standing out is very bad. And so the imposter syndrome is really
into different people. So I guess I don't I have not run into the volume of people that you're talking about, or maybe I am making it oversimplified, that have all this fear, or that being wired for fun, survival, and reproduction. I guess the way that I've looked at it, and it has been my experience, and maybe we're saying the same thing, but in a different way, perhaps, is that there's those who are wired to achieve. There's those that want to achieve and don't know how to. And then there's those that are perfectly content doing nothing and just floating through life. And if someone is content to float, they've got to find a vision. They've got to have a root why for them to do something. The people that can truly make a difference in their lives are those that want to do something, but they don't know how. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And the interesting thing is that so it's, we're talking, of course, we're generalizing. So we're sometimes not doing things because of fear. It's not that everybody is not doing anything because of fear, but we're doing things because we want to achieve. But sometimes also when we want to achieve, we do it from a place of scarcity. We're doing it because we want to prove somebody or something. It's not so often that you see people that are just doing it for the fun and pleasure of it, for contributing. There is, of course, people, luckily, but the majority, when you have particular, and maybe it's because I worked for so many years in corporate environment where competition is very harsh, right? Where
Yeah.
you don't. I remember people don't want to sharing their presentations. You're like, it's like, really, seriously, are you afraid of me using your deck instead of being proud that I'm gonna bringing your work for the broader audience? You're afraid of stealing. So it's this idea, this mentality of scarcity, because we want to prove, we want to be competing with each other, we want to be winning against others. And so this is really where I think there is an opportunity for us to have emotional intelligence and living on our back this past of struggling, of grinding through life, and instead really start embracing it and looking at it from a much more pleasure and joyful and fun way, because we are here all for fun. We're not competing. There is no finish line. And I feel like sometimes you have a lot of people that are anxious because there is a place to get to, there is a destination. And so also when I work with my clients, so the why, and sorry, I see you want to intervene, but the why feels much more lighter. It's much lighter when you have done the exercise of differentiating between who you are and what you do, because then your why becomes again the pleasure of it, versus if you're doing it from justifying who you are. That's really where you get into trouble, because then you feel like, oh my God, what if I get the wrong why? What do you think I should have as a why? Then you get all this self-doubt versus.
So do you think that all the self-doubt and and negative thinking comes from a position of faithlessness, meaning a lack of engagement with God, a lack of engagement with spirituality, that people who are, and when I say faith, some people would call it religion, I call it faith. Do you believe that, these people that don't know why and not sure what to do, that faith would help them? Because I believe that. I'm curious about your thoughts.
Yeah, so I think it's really interesting we are touched upon, because I rediscovered my faith really maybe very recently, actually. I think this is about believing in yourself. And of course, we want to believe that who we are, I'm very passionate of Joe Dispenza these days. I read a lot of his books. I don't know if you've been exposed to his work.
I have
He's
not.
really amazing. He works in quantum physics and how our brain works. So it's really, really interesting. And so he really wants us to look into ourselves and who we are, and even think that the divinity is in us. So we are potentially, representing God in this world. So I actually have a strong faith today, but I don't think that's necessary. The first step is really about believing in yourself and believing that you are a perfect human being. And this is where I think Eckhart Tolle helped me in that, in a way, also Byron Katie, which is really about feeling the presence, being present in the moment. Because when you start being more present in the moment, and you start understanding and looking yourself around and looking at the perfection of nature, the perfection of a tree, perfection of a bird, and then all this anxiety that you have for yourself is kind of history. Because you're like, I mean, hold on a second. Look at the power of my body. Look at the power of the energy and the cells that we have in our body that allows us to speak and run and do things without us doing anything, without any thought, right? It's all automatic. How is this possible? So the faith is starting with you. Look at who you are. Look at how magic human beings are, and the magic of nature. And so when you start detaching yourself from you being part of the problem, and instead you're seeing yourself as a perfect human being with a great opportunity, great journey of growth in front of you, then the perspective is very different, right? Then you start taking off all the heaviness of, oh my God, what is my why? Who do I want to be? Who am I? What have I done? What have I achieved? And so instead you start looking at life like, hold on a second, this is actually quite fun. Look at all the exposure we have. Look how we're all, different characters, and the diversity that we all are, and embracing this diversity and enjoying it. So really approaching life and leadership and work in a very different way. And I know
so what do you think are the attributes of a quality leader?
Curiosity is the first. So being curious, because curiosity allows us to sit down and learn from everyone. And I'm going to mention another person that is really a mentor and a guide for me, which is Dave Ramsey. And if you hear some of his interventions and interviews that he does recently, he is like in his 80s, right? And he still says, every time I'm sitting with anybody, 5 minutes into my conversation, I take out my notebook and take notes. And, this is somebody that is quite successful, right? And I'm sure he doesn't have a lot to learn from a very humble perspective. And instead, he believes that he can learn from anybody. So that openness, that curiosity about sitting down and listening to who you have in front. So capacity. So the second characteristic is listening, is being active listening and understanding. So you listen because you want to understand. You don't listen because you want to respond. You don't listen because you're distracting. You're doing certain things, 15 things at the same time. And then the other characteristic would be being humble, being a bit embracing what we spoke in the last 20 minutes, which is about you don't have anything to prove.
Sure.
I love one of the definitions that I love from 20 years ago that I went to my first more than 20 years ago. I went to my first leadership training, and somebody said this sentence that really sticked into my mind. It says, leadership is about making ordinary people do extraordinary things. So
I like that.
ultimately, it's beautiful, isn't it? It's really powerful. And because it's all about other people, it's not about you. You're going to be leading the way for sure, but you're going to be leading the way by opening doors, by being there for the other people, by being helpful, by being supportive, encouraging. And this is why I believe that coaching is a skill that makes any leader a better leader. Because by default, you're going to learn to ask better questions instead of giving advice. You're going to understand that you're going to let people find out by themselves. And also, this is really something that I'm very, very passionate about. We have the answers in ourselves. We know things, and we gotta be start trusting ourselves more. And of course, you can Google an answer if you really have a curiosity, but that is just going to be inspiring you to find the answer. You have the answer in yourself, and you got to trust yourself. So the trust and faith is another characteristic of leadership.
So yeah, so what do you see as the balance between trusting yourself but not operating in a vacuum?
Yeah, I mean, when you are curious, you're going to be asking questions. You're going to be asking, getting inspired. You can't be in a vacuum because, and I'm gonna mention another of my favorite author, which is Stephen Covey, and the 7 Habits of Effective People. I mean, he talks a lot about, he introduced me to the concept of interdependence, because I somehow had stopped at the level of independent. You want to be independent, right? First you're dependent, then you're independent, and you want to be independent. And then you understand, well, hold a second, if I want to go far, I have to go together. I can't go by myself. I can't go alone. So I need this interdependence. So how do I make it so you can't be in a vacuum? Because if what they say, right, is that you want to go fast, you go yourself. If you're going to go far, you have to go with others. So you can't be in a vacuum because you're not going to go very far. You might go fast, but you're not going to go very far. Everybody needs people around them. All the biggest leaders. Yeah, I mean, I was listening again to the story of Ford, Henry Ford, and how he was pushing his team to make the 8-cylinder engine, and and it wasn't him, right? He was inspiring his team, and his team a year later said, "No, we can't. It's impossible." And he was like, "Impossible doesn't exist. Go back and work. You have all the time of the world. There is no rush." I mean, the story is so beautiful, and finally they cracked it, because in fact nothing is impossible if you put enough attention to it and you spend enough time with a problem. And so it is about enabling and finding complementary skills. So you can't have it all. So you can't be in a vacuum. And so you trust your intuition. And I love also the concept that intuition is not instinct. Intuition is not rationality. Intuition is tapping into thousands of data that our brain has elaborated and stored, and that you wanna follow your intuition, because if you're not, you're just accessing a very limited amount of information that your brain has top of mind. Intuition is tapping into your amazing internal data bank. So you do that, and you work with other people that have other type of intuition, because they have other type of experiences. And that's really where the power of interdependence is.
Interesting. So when someone first comes to you and says, "Okay, I want to do something different. I know I was meant for more," what's the first thing you tell them?
Yeah, I mean, I ask them more question around, where do you want to go? What is your dream? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? And I don't want them to start telling me about their past, because this is the beauty of coaching. Coaching doesn't look at your past. Your past is your past. Every day you can decide who you want to be. Nothing is excluded. There is nothing written before you. And we are trapped by our decision, by our past. We're trapped by our experiences, and we think, particularly when you get in your middle-aged type of, when you're in 20s, probably everything is possible. But when you get into your 40s, 50s, you start thinking, that's it. Who I am is what I've done. And I'm challenging them and said, no, let's start all over. Who do you want to be? What do you want to do?
Absolutely.
And start breaking it down.
Absolutely. I mean, it is not over when you're 40 or 50, and anyone who thinks it is probably just going to die young, quite frankly. I mean, there is so much more to life. So, and on that note, we're right at half an hour. So this is the part of the show. It goes by so fast. This is the part of the show where you speak directly to the audience and those that are going to watch on replay and give them some words of encouragement as how to understand themselves.
Be curious, write down your thoughts and read them for yourself. Clean up your mind every day. Every time you feel trapped in your thoughts, the first thing you got to do is take a walk and freshen up your mind. Walking in nature is the best thing. And then the second thing you're going to do is write down your thoughts, all your thoughts, without judgment, without, with a lot of self-compassion. Because the first thing is about self-awareness and and self-compassion. I love self-compassion instead of self-esteem, because self-esteem goes up and down depending on your achievement. Self-compassion taps in exactly when self-esteem is low. So self-compassion is about being just genuinely loving yourself and understand. I want to understand myself better. I want to understand why did I said what I said? Why do I think what I think? And learning to see patterns, that really looking at the patterns of your life and just really be genuinely curious. I always say, put your science hat on and be an investigator, a scientist with yourself. So I would definitely say journaling and taking walks in nature.
That's great. Chiara, thank you so much for being on the show today. You certainly bring a different perspective, and I think it's something for people to think about. And although I don't think you and I agree exactly eye to eye on it, that does not mean that you are wrong and I am right, or I am right and you are wrong. It just means you have found something that works for you and is obviously helping other people too. So thank you for being my guest today.
Thank you, Sean, for having me. It was really a pleasure. Have a wonderful day and a wonderful week.
And everyone else, that's Litvak Leadership Live for today. We will be back tomorrow with another guest. Oh, and she dropped off from another place, but at the same time. Have a great day now. Be blessed.